We're going to bring things right back up to the minute with Florence Villeminot, a model of modernism. You're taking us also to Brazil. We've been reporting on this in our main news bulletin. There's news that came out just in the last few hours, in fact, about the president, Michel Temer. Rumours have been swirling for a while, but he has now actually been charged formally with corruption, which he denies.
Huge story, as you can imagine, in Brazil. Of course, the papers there are catching up. So let's look at some websites. Let's start with O Globo, which actually was the paper that originally leaked this story. Now, this huge news follows the release of an audio recording in which Temer appears to be discussing bribes with a businessman, Josele Batista. He's the boss of a giant meatpacking firm that's implicated in a corruption scandal. Now, this article goes through all the details. Essentially, Brazil's chief prosecutor, so Rodrigo Jano, says that Michel Temer did indeed receive a very large sum of money. They're talking about 135,000 euros from this businessman, but via an intermediary.
All right. President Temer, as we said, denies any wrongdoing. He's vowed to prove his innocence. It is the first time that a sitting Brazilian president has been accused of criminal charges.
There have been so many political scandals in Brazil. This is a huge one, though, and it could get even bigger. You can read more about it here in O Estadão. Essentially, Temer is expected to face further charges in the coming weeks, including for allegations of obstruction of justice. Now, this paper comes back on the fact that Temer's popularity has been plunging. Recent polls put his approval rating at 7%. Opposition parties have been demanding snap elections, and his impeachment, his fate, is now in the hands of Brazil's Congress.
All right, a story we will absolutely be following here on France 24, I can assure you of that. We'll stay in the Americas for our next story. Move over to North America. In the United States, papers focusing on the Supreme Court's announcement that in October it's going to fully consider the legality of this travel ban introduced by Donald Trump. It's been described as a Muslim ban as well by some people. And papers are divided over how much of a victory this is for Donald Trump.
Well, Donald Trump immediately said this was a clear victory for our national security, but a lot of papers, including conservative papers, have been tamping that down a little bit. You can see here the Washington Times, a big cheerleader of Donald Trump, saying this is a victory for Donald Trump, but it's a limited victory because we're going to have to wait until October for the Supreme Court to actually give its opinion about that. Now, there's another interesting opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal today that says this is an important victory for the White House, but it's more important for the Constitution's separation of powers. Why is that? Well, it's because it's a unanimous rebuke to judges from lower courts who, according to the Wall Street Journal, really crossed the line by trying to block this travel ban. And it's a really interesting opinion because the Wall Street Journal says, look, the ban was neither wise nor necessary, but that's not really the issue. According to the Wall Street Journal, essentially the problem was that these lower judges crossed the line and tried to essentially be backseat drivers for the commander-in-chief.
And this is how the law works, isn't it? Sort of rulings get made and tested by other levels of the court. As you said, that's going to be tested in October in the Supreme Court. Just looking at Donald Trump himself, one of the newspapers has a new poll that it's reporting on about attitudes towards the United States since Donald Trump took office.
It's a very interesting poll that's been picked up in a lot of papers. I pulled out an article from the Washington Post today. This is a Pew Research Center poll that surveyed 37 countries. And according to the results, well, Trump's presidency has taken a toll on the U.S.'s image abroad. It's tumbling in the world's regard, according to...
In what sort of sense? People wanting to go on holiday
well,
there,
for instance,
or do business with...
well, from Chile to Italy, Sweden to Japan, essentially majorities of people in these countries believe that the president is arrogant, intolerant, unqualified, and dangerous. In fact, they have less confidence in Donald Trump than they had in George W. Bush immediately after the invasion of Iraq. So it's very, very low. Now, on the flip side, a majority of people do see him as a strong leader. And there is one bright spot, Russia. A majority of people in Russia have confidence in Donald Trump.
Well, speaking of Russia, very neatly moving on to Russia, where critics outside of Russia, are continuing to tear into Oliver Stone's documentary series, The Putin Interview. It was released this month. You've got something from the New York Times.
I have, and it's interesting because it was released earlier, but it's still making waves. It was, for instance, broadcast on French public television yesterday. There was a debate afterwards. There's a critical piece in the New York Times by Masha Green that says, look, this is not a lesson in journalism. It's not even that entertaining, but it's an important documentary series to watch because it can help you understand the apparent adoration that Oliver Stone has for Putin and Donald Trump as well. It's a very interesting article. I recommend it.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. Florence Villeminot there, giving us something to read, something to watch.